The views expressed on the following program are not necessarily those of WPSL. However, you're invited to like and share them on Facebook. Howard Insurance of Port St. Lucie now presents the African American Scene, hosted by Rudy Howard.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. Always glad to be with you here on a Wednesday night. Wow. Do we have a lot going on? Well, today is the first day of Black History Month, February 1st. So we're going to try to give you some Rudy University knowledge tonight.
Rudy University knowledge. That sounds interesting.
But I got a couple things to start with. Let me just say that I hear all these conservatives whining about having Gorish approved as the Supreme Court nominee. And I'm going to say to you that you created this barnstorm yourself. And I'm going to tell you why you created it. You could have given him a hearing and voted him down. And while the Democrats may not have liked it, that would have been acceptable because at least he got the hearing. By refusing to give the hearing, it was a spit in the eye of the Democrats in Congress. Now you're complaining because they won't move. Do you not recall what they did to Loretta Lynch? They made Loretta Lynch wait over 150 days before they finally approved her appointment to replace Eric Holder. So now all of those things were done, and now you want Democrats to play nicey-nicey. Well, that's just pure insanity. And I'm going to tell you something. For the first time that I can remember in my lifetime, normally Democrats go, well, it's for the good of the country. Let's not do that. That ain't the mindset this time. The mindset this time is don't give an inch. Now, in the end, it is more than likely that the conservatives will prevail because they have the numbers. But there's going to be a fight. And there should be a fight. Because that thing with Merrick Garland was an insult. And all you had to do was have the hearing. You could have had a bogus hearing and at the end of the hearing said no. And people might not have liked it, but at least you had the hearing. No, you wouldn't even have the hearing. So in other words, you was like, y'all can go jump in the lake. I ain't giving you nothing. Now you're saying, don't do that. Were you crazy? Why do you think there's so many people outside of the houses of their elected representatives saying, do nothing? I have never seen that in my entire life. I've never seen the Democrats act like that. Because they are mad. Then you held up over 100 court appointments that the president was supposed to make. You jury-rigged a process that technically wouldn't allow you to go to recess so that he couldn't make recess appointments. And now you're saying, oh, come on. Let's get back into the playground and play nicey-nicey. No. It's not going to be like that. There's people out there that are angry. And just like you felt there was people out there angry that voted for Trump, there's people out there now that are angry. And if you can't see it, you're blind. These protests that are going on, some of which have been completely spontaneous, are a result of policies and actions that are offensive to the very core of some of our American beliefs. That be the truth. Now, you might disagree with me, and that your number is 340-1590. I dare you to call up and disagree with me about that, because there's nothing to disagree about, because I am on point with that piece of information. One more thing before I get into the program for tonight, because it's kind of stuck with me. Steve said, I don't like any African American who's conservative. And I want to say once again, that is dead wrong. There are conservatives that I have the utmost respect for. There are conservatives I have the utmost respect for. I have no respect for conservatives that bash other black people. There is where the rubber meets the road for me. I have no use for them. So just to get that off my shoulders. And I got Gary on line one. Yes, sir.
Hi, Rudy.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. Isn't what you're talking about exactly what's wrong with American politics?
Yes.
Oh, this tit for tat. The reason Trump was elected, I believe, was because at least a third of the country didn't like politics as it was.
Yes.
And now there's a new, let's call him sheriff in town, and our elected representatives are playing this tit-for-tat game. You didn't vote for Miss Lynch or whatever her name was.
Merrick Garland.
Well, no, I mean he didn't get a hearing. I'm on about Loretta Lynch. Sorry. You know.
No.
Exactly,
Let me
exactly what's wrong though with American politics is our politicians. You know, because we have a two-party system. If they throw temper tantrums at the other side, be it conservative or Democrat, Republican or Democrat, and nothing gets done. And isn't that the very reason why people all over the country who wanted a change voted for Trump and put Trump in office?
Gary, I would say that there's probably a lot of truth to that, but I'm going to tell you where I come down on this. It is not so much that Merrick Garland didn't get a vote. What I really was offended by, he didn't even get a hearing. Not given,
and that was wrong.
Okay, so now the question is, Gary, how do we handle that? Do we overlook that and say, well, it's okay for you to do that to us, but we're not going to do anything to you because we want to play nicey and be nice to you in the sandbox? Is that what we should do?
No, we should be the bigger man, and we should all look, and we should look past it. The person that Trump has nominated for the Supreme Court called Merrick Garland today and apologized to him that he didn't get a hearing. That's someone being the bigger man, in my opinion.
I didn't hear that, but that certainly makes me feel good about him. But it doesn't change the fact that, listen, and I was telling this to one of my conservative friends earlier, it was such a stupid thing that they did, because all they had to do, they had the votes. All they had to do was have the hearing, have the vote him down, and it would have been over. But they would have had a hearing, and they would have had a vote, and they still would have got the outcome that they wanted to have anyway. Merrick Garland would not be Supreme Court justice. But instead of that, they just stuck a finger in the eye of the president. That's what offends me. And that's what offends most Democrats, and why most Democrats want to fight, because that was offensive.
Right. Well, I wouldn't call myself a Democrat. but that was offensive to me also. And it's also offensive to me any time that whoever the opposition in Parliament, or sorry, in government, fails to give proper hearings, or fails to carry out their duties, like, the Democrat senators or congressmen that didn't turn up for the committee votes. I mean, we have to get past that, Rudy. That is no good for the country at all.
I agree.
And I'm going to say that I think anybody that's on the Democrat side in government who doesn't who carries on doing this, I think people are going to remember it, and that they may have a problem, when they get re-elected. And the same on the Republican side. But at this juncture, at this moment in time, us not coming together and trying to come up with a solution, and just hiding behind, the fact that I'm a Democrat and you PO'd me, 6 months ago or a year ago, or, that's just not going to get us anywhere. And it's the same as the president, okay, the guy's a buffoon, but he's the president of the United States. And so far, I like the majority of what he's done as president. Well, everybody everybody needs to take a step back, look at the bigger picture, I think, and come together for the good of the country. And, I come from a country where there's at least a three-party system.
Yes, you do.
And we don't have this sort of issue, because, there's never one party that's in control of everything. They need to form an alliance.
Well, you got you got a shadow cabinet there, mm-hmm. and you also, at any point in time in the parliamentary system, retain the right to call a vote of confidence for the party that's in power. We don't have that.
No. Maybe we should have.
Maybe we should. I've always thought, after studying how the parliament works, I've always liked the idea of a shadow cabinet. That seems to make a lot of sense to me.
Right. Yeah, I do as well. But anyway, Rudy, that was my 2 pennies worth.
Well, thank you, sir.
And I just hope that politicians on both sides, be they Republican or Democrat, or independents for that matter, can look past what's happened in the past and start with a clean slate and say, yes, he's a good pick, no, she's not a good pick, and, vote on the merit of the person that's being put before them, so that the country can move forward and prosper. That's all anybody wants.
Okay.
In the country is for people to prosper, and we're not going to prosper if we're continually divided like this by our politicians.
Okay, I hear you, and
right.
I'm just going to say in closing, most of my life, I have agreed with what you just said. Not this time. This is the first time in my life I can say, normally I had a reputation growing up, even in college, of being the guy that was the peacemaker. I come in the room, wait a minute, come on, let's calm down here. We can resolve this. Not this time. Not this time. I don't feel that way this time. There's too many times there was sticks stuck in the eye that didn't have to be. I can appreciate gamesmanship, and that's fine. Like I said, it's so simple. They could have had a hearing and voted him down. That would have been okay. I might not have liked it, but that would have been okay. But to say, I'm not even giving you a hearing. That, in other words, go jump in the lake. I don't give a doggone what you think. That's really offensive.
It is offensive, and it's wrong.
Yes.
And like I say, our politicians on both sides need to get it through their heads that the people, at least a third of the people, don't want that type of government anymore.
Okay.
And, politicians need to, they need to be the bigger man.
Okay.
There was no need for the president to go on TV and say about Chucky Schumer crying. There was no need for Chucky Schumer to, I don't know whether he was faking his tears, or for Nancy Pelosi to tell the congressman, say you're a Muslim. All this rubbish that it's just white noise. They need to, get over themselves and get on with the job of managing the country.
Okay, I hear you, sir. Thank you for your call very much. Appreciate
All right, Rudy.
appreciate your opinion. Like I said, I probably for 80% of my life, I agree with what Gary said, but not this time. Not this time. But now let me get to one more thing, and those of you who've listened to me a long time have heard this before, so just make pretend like you haven't heard it before. This thing about immigration, especially with respects to Mexico, I want to get this straight for some of you who may not be as knowledgeable about history. I want you to know there was Mexicans in Arizona before there was white folks. There was Mexicans in California before there was white folks. There was Mexicans in Texas before there was white folks. And let me refresh your memory. One of the favorite things we watched growing up as a kid was Zorro, okay? And Zorro, guess where that was? That was California, and those were Mexicans. Now, here's what I want you to understand, okay? And I want you to get this really importantly. This is really important for you to understand this. If you're Mexican and you live in Arizona and you've been there for 4 generations, you've been there longer than any white guy that's ever touched the turf of Arizona, and somebody stops and checks you because you got brown skin, you're probably going to be pretty pissed off. And I dare say most people who would be in that situation would be pretty pissed off. You've got grandkids, children that graduated from college, and now somebody's going to stop you because they suspect you of being Mexican. Boy, you got to think that through. You got to really think that through. That does not make sense. It really does not. And if you can just think back to Disney on Sunday night, and as a kid, I was in love with Zorro. Matter of fact, I think one of my first Halloween costumes, I got a Zorro outfit with a little piece of chalk on the end of the sword. That was all Mexicans. But anyway, I'm gonna take my next call. And we got Carlos on line 1. Yes, sir.
Hey, Rudy. What's going on?
Oh, nothing much.
On the subject with the putting on the Supreme Court, if people could just go and Google Chuck Schumer and Barack Obama when he was a senator, on his way out, George W. Bush on his way out, there was a rumor that I can't remember which Supreme Court justice it was that was going out, and then Barack put that Spanish lady, I forgot her name, but on the way out, Chuck Schumer and Barack Obama, who was a senator at the time, said, no, it's not fair. For the last 60 years, on the way out, you should leave it for the new president to come in. I'm not lying. You can Google it.
I did today.
They did say that.
No, well, I'm just going to tell you that's not. I'm just going to tell you that's not true.
You can Google it.
I did it today. I looked it up today because
it's on there. I saw it out there.
I had
all your listeners could do that. Oh, and another thing, Zorro was a Mexican. He was a Spaniard. The Spaniards owned California at the time.
Okay.
He wasn't Mexican.
Okay.
I'm just letting you know.
You're probably right.
Hey, one more thing. Growing up as a Democrat, because I was in South Bronx, it was a crap hole, and I used to go to my cousin's neighborhoods, which lived in the Republican neighborhoods. I said, wow, what a difference from where I lived to. He said, that's because that's the way you guys vote. You guys keep on voting that. That's what you keep on getting. And growing up, it's true. I opened up my eyes. The two greatest Republicans that ever lived, Martin Luther King and Lincoln, who freed the slaves. The two greatest Republicans that ever lived, and they both took a bullet for the because and that's a shame. Okay, sir. Have a nice night.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that was interesting. But just for those of you that don't know, the South Bronx has a notorious reputation. Having spent 10 years in New York, there's parts of the South Bronx that is absolutely gorgeous. Gorgeous. Now, when you think of South Bronx, you can think about Fort Apache, that movie that showed all the bombed out. But yes, all of those are there. But there's a part of South Bronx that is absolutely beautiful. Don't let anybody tell you any different. And if there's any New Yorkers out there, listen, they'll tell you I'm not telling you a tale. I'm telling you the truth. Okay, so let's get on to my topics for tonight. First thing I want to do is something I also did a while back is, as these protests have been emerging, I hear some of my conservative friends objecting to protests. I almost get the feeling they feel they have the right to ratify protests, whether a protest is proper or improper. And that's a bunch of hooey. Let me read for you the definition of protest once again. To complain in some public way about an act already done or about to be done, such as adoption of a regulation by a county board sending troops overseas or use of the death penalty. To dispute the amount of property taxes, the assessed evaluation of property for tax purposes, or an import duty, a written demand for payment of the amount owed on a promissory note which has not been paid when due, or a check which has been dishonored, not paid by the bank. Okay, now, that is a basic dictionary definition of protest. So you don't get a chance to define what is a protest that satisfies you. And the most interesting thing that I find is when I ask, because this has come up so much in the last year, when I ask a conservative, what is a protest that you can accept, I usually don't get an answer. Because the only protest that is acceptable is the protest that they believe in, i.e. Tea Party, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All the other protests are improper. Well, I got to tell you, I can't remember in my lifetime since the Vietnam War, and I've heard somebody else said this, and I'm old enough to remember those days, where there has been so many protests, some of them totally spontaneous. The protest regarding the ban was totally spontaneous. People immediately went out to the airports to protest that executive order. Now, that's protest. You don't like it? And I've said before, protests are supposed to make you uncomfortable. If they didn't make you uncomfortable, why would you do them? So that is protest. So get over that, please. You don't get a chance to decide what is a proper protest. Now, I don't care who you are. nobody thinks that violent protest is proper, but protest is American as apple pie. There's always been protests in this country. So let's get over that. So I had to get that out there. Okay. Here's my Rudy University for tonight. There's, and this is why you have Black History Month, by the way. There's a group of Muslim Africans, I'm going to guess you have never heard of, called the Moors. Okay? The Moors were pretty much a dominant part of Europe for a good part of the world development. In the early Middle Ages, the Moors were a African people from North Africa. The playwright William Shakespeare used the word Moor as synonymous for African. And Arab writers further buttressed the identity of the Moors. Now, black soldiers, specifically identified as Moors, were actively recruited by Rome, served in Britain, France, Switzerland, Austria, Hungary, Poland, and Romania. Saint Maurice Patron, saint of medieval Europe, was only one of many soldiers and officers under the employ of the Roman Empire. Now, I know this is why you have Black History Month. I know some of you you probably never even heard the word Moors before. And this is why you need to know that. And although the generation of Spanish rulers have tried to expunge the Moors era from the historical record, recent archaeology and scholarship now shed a fresh light on the Moors who flourished in for more than 700 years, from 711 AD until 1492. They had some incredible architectural developments. The intellectual achievement of the Moors in Spain had a lasting effect. Education was universal in Moorish Spain, while in Christian Europe, 99% of the population was illiterate, and even kings could neither read or write. At a time when Europe had only 2 universities, the Moors had 17 universities located in Almeria, Cordova, Granada, Jaén, Malaga, Seville, and Toledo. In the 10th and 11th century, public libraries in Europe were non-existent, while Moorish Spain boasted more than 70 libraries, including one in Cordova that housed hundreds of thousands of manuscripts. Universities in Paris and Oxford were established after visit by scholars to Moorish Spain. How about that? I bet you didn't know that. This North African tribe had this powerful impact on Europe. And you know, as my research indicated, the Spanish, to a large part, have tried to expunge the Moors from the history books. But the Moors are there. But here's the even more important part. The Moors were in Sicily, they were in Spain, and so there's no wonder there's a good browning of the people in Europe. And that's kind of interesting when you think about all the places where the Moors had taken hold of parts of those countries. Especially they were in Sicily for quite a time. And if you get a real honest Italian, they will tell you there is some African roots associated with Sicilians, but frequently that part is oftentimes overlooked. But I encourage you to do some research and find out more about the Moors because they had a very significant impact. And we got Renee on line one.
Hello, Rudy.
My friend.
How are you?
Good, good.
It's interesting you bring up the Moors because actually in the Spanish area, specifically in the southern part of Spain, that was a very dominant force,
Yes.
back in the days.
Yes.
And interestingly enough, if you move forward, and you could probably check this too, but my recollection is that in Shakespeare, Othello was actually a Moor.
That's correct. You are correct. Othello was a Moor. Yes, you're right.
As far as the Shakespearean, the play Othello, it was actually a Moor.
Now, I wonder how many people knew that, Renee.
I don't know, but but you bring it up, and it's really interesting because, from my background, being, myself, having a Hispanic background, that section of Spain, there was, the dominance was incredible. I mean,
it was
very, very powerful. Like you said, there was no specific genealogy, if you will, but they just were a very powerful and very, as far as a soldier is concerned, they were very strong and very dominant.
Yes, and they had a high education level.
Extremely high education level.
Right.
As a matter of fact, as my father used to be in the military, so we remember down south, and one of the things that they studied was how the Moors actually approached military objectives.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So I just wanted to give you that little bit of tidbit too.
Thank you. I always love it. You always give me good stuff when you call. You just don't call enough.
I know. I am just leaving work right now, my friend.
All right, Renee.
You take care.
All right, take care now. I love that guy. That guy and I go way back, and he always comes in and gives me some pretty insightful information. So as you can see, he's knowledgeable about the Moors, and that's pretty cool. Let me tell you something else. Like, last week, I talked to you about Reconstruction. And I brought that up because I was trying to get you to understand that African Americans have played a very important role in the development of this country. And you can see it really with Reconstruction. Now, let me just give you some information. Reconstruction era was from 1863 to 1877. Okay, now hold on to your hats. In that period of time, there were more than 1,500. I want you to listen to this now. There were more than 1,500 African American office holders during Reconstruction. 1,500. Let me give you some key. The first African American senator and representative, Senator Hiram Revels from Mississippi. And then you had Representative Benjamin R. Turner from Alabama. Robert DeLarge from South Carolina, Joshua Wells from Florida, Jefferson Long from Georgia, Joseph Rainey and Robert B. Elliott from South Carolina. So now, why did I tell you this story? I told you this story for the same reason I gave it to you last week. You often ask us about being successful within this free market, blah, 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 blah. This, I wonder where everybody would be if these gentlemen were not pushed out by black codes, because after being successful as statesmen for these states, they initiated something called the Black Codes. But on December 18th, 1865, Congress ratified the 13th Amendment, formally abolishing slavery. The Civil War ended on April 9th, 1865. Now, so you had the government who said no more slavery and trying to give equal rights. And the Civil War ends on April 9th, 1865. Well, then the Black Code laws were adopted. Okay? The Southern legislatures passed laws that restricted the civil rights of emancipated former slaves. Mississippi was the first state to institute laws that abolished full civil rights of African Americans. Some of the laws were so restrictive that they resembled old system of slavery because they included a forced labor provision for various offenses. So if you were black and they caught you doing something wrong, they could put you into forced labor. Although Congress responded with legislation that led to the Civil Rights Act of 1866, states kept on the books laws that continued the legacy of black codes and therefore second-class citizenship for the newly freed slaves. So, and this is where I get agitated, especially for my friends who say, we believe in the rule of law. Now, they passed the 13th Amendment, abolishing slavery. Then they passed the 14th Amendment, which was designed to provide citizenship and civil rights for recently freed slaves. But those laws were so now you understand. Now I'm just giving you a real education. Now just think about this. 1,500 African Americans that were office holders during the Reconstruction era. And it was not till Edward Brooke, almost 100 years later, that we got another black senator in the United States government. How is that possible? How could that happen in America? Well, folks, think about that, because that's really something to think about. We had made such an intricate part and contribution to this country, and just like that, it was gone. Well, anyway, I hope that I gave you some knowledge tonight, and I want you to look up the Moors. I was very impressed. My friend Renee was on top of it. Othello was about a Moor. That's pretty cool. I bet you not many of you knew that Othello was about a black man.
I hope William Shakespeare knew it.
Oh, he did know it. Yes, he did know it. Now, I would like to say thank you so much for tuning into the African American scene. We're going to leave a little early because we have IRSC basketball. God bless and be safe, and I will see you right here next Wednesday for the African American scene.
The African American Scene with Rudy Howard, Wednesday evenings in the 6 o'clock hour. Stay tuned now for IRSC basketball. Coming up next right here on Digital 1590.